Hello friends, today I'm going to talk about indirect function. If you've gone through my last video, lookup picture, you will remember that I have used indirect function. If you want to view lookup picture, you can refer to the video link which is written at the bottom right corner of my screen. In this video series, we will be talking about indirect function in detail. The first part is what is an indirect function and how to use it. The second part is how to use indirect function in dynamic list or drop-down list. How to create drop-down list which depends on another value. The third one is dynamic chart. In this example, these are the different states of America and these are the cities of America. Now, in this example, I have selected Colorado. Colorado is a state of America. Within Colorado, I see all different cities of Colorado. But if I change this Colorado to California, see here, I change this to California. Amazingly, this list also changes dynamically to the cities of California. It doesn't remain for Colorado, right? How to create this dynamic list is what we're going to learn in part 2 of this video series. In part 3 of this video series, we will be talking about the dynamic chart. This is a very simple dynamic chart, not complicated at all. If you know the concept of indirect function, it will be very simple for you to use it. Now here, this example, this is the data series that we have. Now depending on this data series, I have created this data set. Now see how this data set works. Here I have the chart. If I click here, automatically this chart changes for 2010. Now it changes for 2011. Now it changes for 2012. Like this chart is a completely dynamic chart. How do we create this chart? This we're going to learn in part 3. Let's get back to part 1. Here, let's talk about indirect function. What is an indirect function? Definition wise, indirect function is a function which converts a string into a valid reference. What that means? Let's take an example and understand the same statement. If I want to get the value from this cell, I would definitely type equal to the reference to that cell and enter. Do you see I've got 1.333? However, if I want to fetch the value depending on the reference written in the cell, then how would I do that? Will typing equal to the cell help me? Let's see. Let's hit enter and find out what exactly is the answer. No, it does not give me 1.333. It gives me only B7. That means when I type equal to the reference to the cell, it gets me the data present in that cell. It does not convert that data into reference, as in this case, B7 does not mean the reference B7. It has taken as text B7. If I want to convert this B7 written in this cell into a valid reference, then what would I do? Answer is indirect function equal to indirect function. Indirect function contains two parameters, reference text and A1 style. What this A1 means, that we'll look at a little later in the next example. Reference text means this text. Now, as I mentioned, indirect function converts the text into a valid reference. So this B7 will get converted into a valid reference, that is B7, which is this cell. Let's see. I close the bracket and I hit enter and see, I get the valid reference and valid value. This value is pulled up via this B7. Now, let's take another example of indirect function. When I type equal to indirect function, I see this A1. Let's understand the meaning of this A1. In Excel, every cell is referred by the combination of column and a row. As an example, this cell will be termed as A, column number A and 1. This cell A2, A3, A4, A5 and so on. Similarly, this cell will be termed as H16 because H is the column and 16 is the row, right? Now, let's see how does indirect function is related to this one. Remember that A1 that I talked about? Now, this A1, A2, A3 is a reference type. Excel has another reference type as well that we can see by clicking on Office button, Excel options, and after Excel options we can go to the Formulas tab and check this box which says R1C1 reference style and hit OK. When I click OK, you will surprisingly notice that these alphabets have got converted into numbers. Similarly, this cell is called as R16C8. Similarly, this cell will be called as R10C11. Right? Now this is R1C1 reference style, and you can also see the reference over here, R10C11. Similarly, this cell is called as R10C2 because it's row number 10 and column number 2. Right? Now this is another mode of Excel. Let's convert it back to normal mode and use indirect function once again. So I click on Office button, I click on Excel options, I go to Formulas tab, and I uncheck R1C1 reference style. Before I uncheck, just for your information, you will notice that at the moment I hover the mouse over R1C1 reference style, a small box appears on the screen which tells me the details of R1C1 reference style. This is the feature of 2007, where hovering the mouse on any text in Excel options gives you the detailed explanation of that same. Now, coming back to our example, I uncheck this box which says R1C1 reference style and I click OK. See, I got all my column names converted back to alphabets. Now, let's use reference style, indirect function. I type equal to indirect, and reference text is this text, right? A8, comma. Now A1. A1 means, am I working in A1 reference style? Remember people, if you see alphabet at the top, that means you're working with A1 reference style. So you are working with A1 reference style. That's true. So here either you can type true or you can type 1. Both are nothing but the same. So I type 1 just to make it a little bit simple. That means I'm working with A1 style, so I put it 1. The moment I close the bracket, I press enter. Now see, I got the value. Now, in indirect function, if you are working with A1 reference style, you need not put that 1 because Excel assumes that you are working with A1 style. Now, let's come back to the example number 4. I'm sorry, I'm skipping one example, but I'll come back to that example a little later. Now, see here, this cell is called as B10. But if I convert this into R1C1 reference style, then this cell will be called as R10C2. Let's say I type R10C2 here. R10C2. Let's understand with this example. Equal to, I type indirect, this R1C1. Now, is this normal A1 style? Is this reference reflects to A1 style referencing technique? No, not really. So that means I am not using the A1 reference style. Since I'm not using the A1 reference style, I have to put 0. Now putting 0 is mandatory here. If you're not using A1 style, then you must put 0. 0 means false. I press enter and see, I got 62 here. Right? Now I type equal to indirect, and this time I'll create this reference as R10C2. Without referring to the cell, I am going to create that R10C2 right here itself. Double inverted comma, I type R, double inverted comma, close. You must be knowing that alphabets are written within double inverted comma. I concatenate that with this value 10. Right? Again, I concatenate further that R10 with C. I type C. Further, I concatenate that with this value divided by 5. Now that will give me 2. So it is R10C2. People do not think that I'm purposely making this example a little bit complicated. I'm doing this because you remember that we have to create the dynamic chart. Dynamic chart uses this technique, the one that I'm using right now. So it's better for you to understand now so that we can implement the same knowledge in the next example. So this is R10C2, right? Now at times when we write the complex formula, it is very essential to go step by step and ensure that you're not making any mistake. I want to see if I have written this formula correctly, which gives the output as R10C2. What I can do is I can select that and I can press F9. When I press F9, it gives me the value r10c2. See people, I've got what I needed. Now what I'll do, in order to get back to the normal formula, because I do not want to remain in this r10c2 format, I'll press Ctrl Z. Now after typing Ctrl Z, I will put comma, and as we have already discussed that this is a R1C1 reference style, so we will put 0, which is false, and the moment I press enter, see, I've got 62. Third example is how can we use the indirect function with name range. When we talk about indirect function with name range, here let's say this cell, I name this cell as the name which is written here, Pradip. I come here, I type Pradip, I press enter. Now this is a name range technique, people. You can expect my the detailed explanation of name range in my future video. This is a name range technique where I have named this cell as Pradip. Now see, what do? I again write the simple example equal to indirect reference text is this text, right? Comma. Am I working in R1C1 reference style? Yes, I am. So I can again ignore that and I press enter. See, I get the complete answer. The answer to all these are using indirect function. So this was the brief explanation about indirect function. People, if you're interested in knowing how to create that dynamic chart, please watch the next video. Thank you very much.